Hello, Abigail here with a little ramble about the Mercury retrograde in Pisces. This Mercury retrograde starts on February 2nd of this year and ends on March 20th of this year. And it has a couple of special features. One, it happens to begin during eclipse season, right bang in the middle. And so there's an extra measure of chaos. If you remember last year, we had a partial Mercury retrograde in Pisces during eclipse season as well. We're kind of carrying through this theme, slightly less chaotic in a sense because we don't have Venus also involved. It was quite a time. But Mercury in Pisces is detriment and in fall because it is both exalted in domicile and Virgo. And so there's a lot of debilitation here. It's not scary. It just means that Mercury doesn't necessarily function at its highest or at its most natural in the sign. I will say Mercury in Pisces is beautiful for music making and creativity and art and for things that are specifically wordless. So expression that doesn't require communication of a verbal or written kind. However, it does cause a lot of hiccups when it comes to direct and clear communication. It causes a lot of issues in making sure that stuff gets done. You're not going to be functioning at your highest. There's going to be a lot of confusion. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of brain fog that's not normal that will clear once this is over. Not to mention starting during eclipses, it's pretty chaotic. Anyways, it will make it to 22 degrees, station retrograde, and then pass all the way back to 8 degrees of Pisces. So securely on one sign, so we don't have to do that transition, which I don't enjoy as a Mercury ruled person, where we have to go from one energy to the next during a retrograde. But this specifically feels like a really major turning point in the year, partially because it ends right before we head into the new zodiacal year. I will say, as a heads up, the pre-shadow period doesn't end until April 9th. So log that away. It's not going to be completely over, but we start to move forward once we hit that spring equinox. And so while it will still feel a bit fuzzy, this spring equinox is definitely going to feel a bit freer and a bit more progressive than last year's, because last year's it was all tangled up in the eclipses, and it was in the eclipse portal, it was in the Venus retrograde, we had the Mercury retrograde. It was just a lot going on. We had just had, Pluto move into Aquarius not too long before. And we were preparing for Saturn's first ingress, all of these things. And so this year, while it will still be chaotic, and I do specifically think it's going to mess with traffic, it's going to mess with weather, it's going to mess with, partially mess with weather because Neptune in modern rulership is the ruler of Pisces. And now Neptune is in Aries. So things are a lot more likely to pop off when it comes to weather patterns. Also, very much the universe kind of echoing what's going on in the material world. The more we destabilize our climate, the more this is going to happen. And Neptune in Aries heralds that and highlights it. Another interesting thing is that all of the planets have had a conjunction with the North Node in Pisces at 8 degrees. And then we're going to have Mercury come back and station on that degree. And so, not to mention that Virgo eclipse is not going to happen, is going to be at like 12 degrees. And so not out of orb of this. So there's a lot of activity around 8 degrees of Pisces. So if you have any planets or placements that are in a trine, in a square, in an opposition, in a conjunction, this will affect you. So that would be mutable signs. So Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, Sagittarius. That would be water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. So there's a lot happening. Like, as I always encourage you to do, check on where this is going on in your chart. It will be important. But just know that communication is not going to be stable, that, internet connection is going to be rough. There's going to be a lot of confusion around, even more confusion around world events and who's doing what. Also, you're going to see a lot of people popping back up in your life and not really having a specific reason, causing a lot of chaos. Use the block button, please. And if you can get ahead of it, block them preemptively, just to get it out of the way. I also find that if you can preempt some energies, it acts as a sort of rectification. It can kind of offset the consequences. So Other interesting things, we also get to experience 3 Mercury trines. We have already experienced one. It was the day before the eclipse in Aquarius. We had the Mercury trine Jupiter. We will have another one on the 9th, which is just a few days after the Mercury cazimi. And then we will have another on April. I don't have my glasses on. One second, Grandma needs to read. And my handwriting sucks. April 3rd, which I also find interesting because that's 6 days before we get to the end of the shadow phase. And so, in the midst of all of this chaos, in all of these kind of twists and turns, we also get this really rich abundance of connection to Jupiter. Jupiter will also be stationing direct. And so that final one will have a direct Jupiter participating. So it'll be a culmination of these 3 sets. And we often see this when there's a planet within the degrees of a retrograde. We get these 3 hits. And it can create this beautiful trifecta of events. And so I would definitely track those days and keep an eye on when those trines have happened, what happened to you right before that, right before the eclipse, what's going to happen on March 9th, and then what is going to happen on April 3rd. There's also another interesting pattern. We have a Mars conjunction. Now, because Mars is a bit behind, we are not going to have quite as many as we had last time. The last Mars conjunction that we had related to the last Mercury retrograde, because it was involved, was January 18th. Now we're kind of in a fresh cycle, but we do get 2 passes. So we get 1 pass on the 15th of March. If you are a Mars ruled person, if you have tricky Mars placements, this can be important. It's important to me because my Almutin Figuris, which is a medieval technique for finding the most elevated planet in your chart, is Mars. And it's a sneaky little one because my Mars in in real life, in my natal chart, doesn't really have as much influence as you would think, especially being kind of trapped in the 12th. But as an Almutin, it has a lot of influence that is not easily perceived on the surface, but is definitely active. So if you have any heavy Mars placements, definitely pay attention to these Mars conjunctions with Mercury because it's going to be very revealing as to your next steps. Same with Jupiter ruled people and the Jupiter trines. It will be generally good for everyone, pardon me, but specifically if you have Jupiter rulership, so Pisces or Sagittarius placements, definitely important to pay attention to, check out, or Cancer placements because it is exalted and also somewhere around your placements in your Cancer house. Another very important date, which is always my favorite part of a Mercury retrograde because it always feels like a very beautiful, much needed turning point. We do have on the 7th of March, we have the Mercury cazimi, which is when the Sun and Mercury have their exact conjunction. This happens every single Mercury retrograde because of the way that the Sun and Mercury interact. You will always have 3 hits. And so we've had the Sun Mercury conjunction one time, we will have the Sun Mercury conjunction retrograde, and then we will have the Sun Mercury conjunction when it goes direct. On this cazimi, I often find that we get insights or clarities, or even sometimes just like a little event that makes things feel better. It's not necessarily life changing, but like everything's been heavy and you have like a really great conversation with a stranger. Everything's been heavy and like you have a little treat that's extra tasty. It can be anything from fated meetings, which I've had with our longer term connections, to something that is kind of almost unimportant, but in that moment deeply important, if that makes sense. So I always encourage people to pay attention. I also find the Mercury retrograde, not Mercury retrograde necessarily, but the Mercury cazimi is also a very important time to kind of see how your innate chart participates with energy. I tend to have a bit of a delayed response to a lot of energetic shifts, which makes sense. I'm autistic. That's also how I process interactions. But I have been able to play with the energy enough to move things ahead a little bit. And I've done that by kind of recognizing through cazimis how that works. For instance, most of my life, Mercury cazimis, I kind of a few days after, I feel the shift in the turn of the energy. But if you do the work ahead of time, if you are paying attention, you can kind of adjust things a little bit to get yourself a little bit ahead of that energy, which honestly, when Mercury retrogrades are really bearing down, can be helpful. I know there's a lot of people who are like, they're not that big of a deal. And like, no, They're not like life destroying all the time necessarily, but they do have a pretty big effect. And it's not necessarily that it's a big effect, it's the fact that it affects all of these little things, which is very mercurial. And no, it's not catastrophizing to be like, hey, maybe back up your computer when there's a Mercury retrograde. Maybe don't leave your electronics in the car to get stolen. That can also happen. Take care of yourself, make sure you're communicating clearly, understand that people tend to show their asses during Mercury retrogrades. I do sense specifically in this Mercury retrograde, because it's in Pisces, because a lot of people aren't going to be able to connect with their feelings, a lot of your exes will be returning, or just people that you have been distancing yourself from or had issues with. Taking that time to either consciously decide to engage with these people, or taking the time to be like, you know what, I'm going to get ahead of that and block them. Or if you need to have a conversation, have that conversation now, or wait until the Mercury Kazemi. Um, you can also wait until, because we have the Jupiter Mars trines, you can also wait until those dates to try to get a better outcome. Um, is it foolproof? No. But what I say about that is like nothing is foolproof. You just try to get the best astrology you can to get the best possible outcome. It's not for certain, but we can try to make it more sure if we want to. So yeah, that's kind of the energy we're going to be. I will say if you're an artist or a creative, this is the time to like remove all of your like timelines and limitations that you can, and really just create for creativity's sake. Allow yourself to kind of flow with the energy. Let the energy take you to new places that you've never been. Will these be like productive, like money making uh, trips of fancy? No. But will they deepen and enrich your connection to your art and your ability to transmute energy? Absolutely. Um, it's very much like no, it's not good for normal stuff, but it's good for like really specific things. I also think this is the slowdown that we all need before we go into the spring equinox, before we kind of kick off the, true zodiacal year. Um, process all that dead energy, let that dead weight go. I would encourage all of you to do unbinding and cord cutting stuff with people that you just feel energetically drained from, or relationships that are over and ended. Finish blocking people on different social media apps if you haven't. Like, really get ahead of the energy and get ready to let some stuff go, because this Mercury retrograde is really asking us to release things, to and we don't have to be like, oh, it's over, I'll never get to have this, but to be like, hey, universe, if it needs to go, I'm willing to let it go in order to clear space for something that's better for me, which can be, from personal experience, really hard to do. But it is helpful and necessary. And I think if we can really lean into this energy, accepting that things are going to be funky, accepting that stuff is going to feel very wonky for a good period of time, knowing that a lot of our frustrations are not going to vanish overnight. Just being able to accept what's happening, I think that alone is going to clear up a lot of space, and some really beautiful things are going to happen during the Mercury retrograde. Unexpected, yes. What you've been asking for, not necessarily. Possibly a solution that you didn't factor in, also, yes. Just know that this type of energy brings odd and bizarre gifts that can actually end up working out if we aren't too deeply attached to the outcome that we wanted, right? So doesn't mean that we can't keep manifesting what we want, but I think solutions are going to show up in unique ways, in ways we didn't expect. Interesting people, places, odd timing that actually works quite well, but only in retrospect, and only if we take the time to slow down and to sit with the energy. I want to go back to what I was saying about the North Node and where it is stationing. There's also a sense of like, what are the possibilities if we can release the things that we've been holding on to? What are the possibilities if we can commit to a future that doesn't necessarily have parameters or boundaries? Like, yes, I want these things, but I'm also okay in getting those things in a unique way. Yes, I want these things, but I'm okay with the universe giving these things to me a different way, or even changing the outcome for something that is better for me. Um, this is an intuitive time, not a practical or a logical time. We have to release release the practical and the logical for now, and we do have to survive on faith in a sense, which obviously faith doesn't fill our tummies or our pockets. But I think for this time, that is what we have to work with. And so, set your sights on the spring equinox, on specifically the kind of ending of Aries season going into Taurus season. Also, because that's when Uranus moves, and that's kind of our last great planet to go into its fresh sign and stay there in Gemini. We will have the node shifting in July, but those, of course, are places in the skies, not planets. So everything is kind of pushing us towards the beginning of Taurus season. I really don't think stuff is going to kick off until we get fully into Gemini season, to be honest, which makes sense with like the fullness of summer. And there are probably a few of you who have very unique charts that this will not be true for. That is just how this works. But for most of us, things will start moving in the summer months, which, if you live in the northern hemisphere, makes sense because that's when things are warmer. So yeah, that's kind of the rundown. Like I said, if you're an artist, create, listen to your dreams. If your dreams are popping off and you don't like them, pay attention to said symbols. I know for me and for other people, they're already popping off the minute Mercury hit those shadow, the shadow degrees, which are the degrees that it will pass through in a retrograde. Things started getting haywire. Part of that is that Saturn conjunction Neptune messing with dreams as well. During this retrograde, I encourage you to cut off cords and portals. Like I said, cord cuttings, unbindings, fiery wall of protection. If any of you want to know how to do these spells, you can ask me in the comments. I will respond. Just doing stuff, and just know that these are not one hit wonders. Unbindings and cord cuttings are a part of a bigger emotional process. Same with wall. Fiery wall, same. You also have to want to like protect yourself from other people in order to do it. And you're like, Abigail, why would I do a spell and not want it to work? You would be surprised. The amount of people who want a spell but are not quite ready to commit to what the spell means is pretty high. I have done spells where I didn't fully want the full outcome because I wanted to hold on to stuff. It's just a human thing. But release old cords, let things be purged. If you're interested in past life stuff, I would encourage you looking into karmic remediation or rectification, or maybe doing Reiki or some kind of energy work to kind of clear things. This is just a great time to clean house, to let things go. I would encourage you, last few days of the Mercury retrograde, I'm going to pop this in my own brain for my own self, to do a bit of a spring clean at the end of the Mercury retrograde, right before we go into Aries season. So there's a really nice clean slate. It doesn't mean, I want to be clear, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to mean everything is sparkling, but like getting something done that you've been putting off, taking your clothes to the local charity shop, just doing something to symbolize the release, to symbolize the letting go, the cleansing, the purge. Could be just cleaning out your fridge. But yeah, I sense there's a lot of energy work to be done in this season. It's already hitting me pretty hard, and I'm like, how much more must I do? It is never ending. But anyways, that is kind of my little ramble on this time. Buckle up, batten down the hatches. It's also eclipse season, so if a relationship of any kind is slipping away, my encouragement is let it go. If it is going to be preserved in any sense, it will not be up to you. It will be up to fate, destiny, the other person. It is important that you recognize that there are just some things you cannot change. And when you can do that, you can actually change a lot. It's one of those weird energetic things where you're like, once you let go, you could hold on. And once you hold on, you can let go. So I encourage you guys to release any cords or bonds that you feel are holding you back, even if it's scary. Do your energy work. If you are in a situation that you cannot functionally get out of, now is the time to do spells to help loosen that up, to create an opportunity for you to get some of your power back. But yeah, that's what I've got for you. I hope this was helpful. It was quite a ramble. But I will remind you there are some really sweet spots with the Mercury Cazimi, with the Jupiter trines. We just have to surrender to the energy and create something beautiful out of something that's kind of a primordial soup of energetic connection and complexity. All right, I hope you all have a blessed Mercury retrograde. You can always contact me if you would like a reading or more clarification on that. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you all later.